The economy is developing, GDP is growing, and unemployment in Russia is at a record low of 2.3%, Putin claims. However, analysts from the Institute for the Study of War highlight that the Kremlin's dictator is once again misleading his citizens.
Putin failed to note that unemployment rates are likely at a record low for youth, as many young Russian men are fighting in Ukraine, and that Russia is suffering significant labor shortages, from a report by the Institute for the Study of War.
Contrary to Putin's assertions, Elvira Nabiulina, the governor of Russia's central bank, warns of challenging times ahead. She indicated that the key interest rate, currently at 21%, might rise to 25% by December 2024.
Russia is diving headlong into stagflation, the worst possible economic scenario. Economic stagflation combined with high inflation. No one knows how to escape it. Fighting stagnation means injecting money, but that fuels inflation. Fighting inflation means tightening the money supply, worsening stagflation. It's like taking both a laxative and a sedative at the same time while trying to feel great.
Russia's already dire economic situation may worsen due to new U.S. sanctions. On December 4th, the U.S. Department of the Treasury announced sanctions targeting an illegal financial network that helped Russian elites use digital assets to bypass sanctions. 5 individuals and 4 organizations tied to TGR Group were blacklisted.
Through the TGR Group, Russian elites sought to exploit digital assets, in particular US dollar-backed stablecoins, to evade US and international sanctions, further enriching themselves and the Kremlin. Bradley T. Smith, acting Under Secretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, on the US Department of the Treasury website.
Military cooperation between Russia and Iran may also be affected by sanctions. According to Reuters, 35 Iranian organizations and vessels involved in transporting illegal oil are now under U.S. sanctions. These measures target Iran's key economic sectors to limit its funding for nuclear programs, missile production, drones, and support for regional terrorist groups. The European Union is seeking to weaken ties between Moscow and Beijing. German Minister of Foreign Affairs Annalena Baerbock recently visited China.
The Russian president is not only destroying our European peace order through his war against Ukraine, but is now dragging Asia into it via North Korea. My Chinese counterpart and I have therefore discussed in depth that this cannot be in China's interest either. Annalena Baerbock, Federal Minister for Foreign Affairs of Germany, during the visit to Beijing.
Despite China's official claims of neutrality regarding Russia's war against Ukraine, Beijing continues to support Moscow. Bilateral trade between the two nations reached a record $240 billion in 2023, making China Russia's largest supplier of goods. The European Union is considering sanctions against Chinese companies supplying drones to Russia, as reported by Bloomberg. Secondary sanctions already imposed by the US have led Chinese banks to sever ties with Russian financial institutions, blacklisted by the US Treasury. Reported by Bastun Katerina Yulia Granovska, UATV News. Russia's 2025 budget allocates record-high spending for its war against Ukraine. The aggressor state plans to spend 13.5 trillion rubles on so-called national defense.
Compared to 2024, where 10.8 trillion rubles, the military budget will increase by 25%. Against 2023 figures, 6.8 trillion rubles, it has doubled. When measured against pre-war 2021, 3.5 trillion rubles, spending has quadrupled. Military expenditures will comprise an unprecedented 32.5% of the budget, a proportion not seen since since the Soviet era. For context, in the first year of the war, 17% of the budget was spent on the military. In 2023, it was 19%, and this year 29.5%, from the Moscow Times publication.
According to the 2025 budget law, Russia's revenues are projected at 40.3 trillion rubles, while expenditures will reach nearly 41.5 trillion rubles, resulting in a deficit exceeding 1 trillion rubles. These optimistic Kremlin forecasts came with a heavy price. Russians face rising costs across the board. Economists predict that all federal regions will end 2025 with budget deficits, highlighting that the surge in military spending is unsustainable for Russia's economy. The government is cutting funding for healthcare, education, social programs, and national economic development to prioritize defense.
Russia is sliding into stagflation and hyperinflation reminiscent of the 90s. The economy is collapsing under the weight of tens of trillions of rubles poured into the military-industrial complex, along with hikes in taxes, tariffs, excise duties, personal income taxes and production costs. This is driving the economy into a deep crisis.
To make ends meet, the Kremlin is launching its largest tax reform in decades. Starting in 2025, a progressive personal income tax scale will be introduced, making a significant shift in fiscal policy. Taxes on corporate profits as well as the extraction of gas, oil and coal will be increased. Excise duties on alcohol, cigarettes and sugary drinks are also set to rise. Additionally, the Kremlin plans to hike fines, penalties and compensation payments. Experts are convinced that such measures are bound to fuel inflation.
Using the central bank's methodology, which averages 3 months of inflation data, the annualized inflation rate is currently around 13.5%, 3.5 times the target. Even the official annual rate of 8.6% is 1.5 times lower than the real figure.
In addition to direct military expenditures, nearly 3.5 trillion rubles are allocated to national security in the budget. This category includes funding in police, the National Guard of Russia, the Investigate Committee, intelligence agencies, and other security forces. Combined, the military and security services will consume almost 41% of the federal budget. One area spared from cuts is spending on Putin and his administration. In 2025, 31 billion rubles will be allocated for this purpose, a 26% increase compared to 2024. Reported by Bastun Katerina Victoria Smirnova, UATV News.